I had a bit of a run-in with the manager at the time. It's a crazy decision, really.
A lot of chaos happened.
Yeah.
Career journey then, where have you been and what brought you here to Hoxton?
I managed to do it, so it gave me like a huge confidence boost. The department's going to get a lot bigger.
And then when I realised it was true, it was like, oh shit. What are you nervous about, just out of interest?
I'm personally responsible, and I think...
Was there like a penny dropping moment where you thought, wow, this is actually quite...
This is hilarious. I saw your LinkedIn video and I was like, oh my God, I've been following Sam for ages. And then you were joining and I was like, this is just really odd.
I'm now working for Hoxton Wealth as their head of creative.
There's always going to be an element of doubt, like, am I making the right decision? It's quite a key point in my kind of career journey. Obviously, since then, it's just seems to have gone crazy on LinkedIn, like, which is brilliant. But yeah, it's just your video. I was like, oh, I think this is the right decision. That is crazy. Like, imagine the pressure.
Gemma, thank you so much for joining me today on the Hoxton Life podcast, a podcast dedicated to those that work within Hoxton Wealth, their career journeys, explaining what they do and hopefully educating people as to what goes into running and working in an international financial planning business. How are you?
I'm good. I'm a little bit nervous, as I mentioned. So, but yeah, no, I'm good. Thank you.
First time you've ever done a podcast?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. What are you nervous about, just out of interest?
I don't know, really. It's just like, I think it's like the lights, the camera. It's just like the presence, I guess, of everything.
It's mad, isn't it? When you think about it and take yourself out of the situation, right? You've got two cameras, they're recording, pointing at you, you've got the light up there, but it's me talking to you.
Yeah.
Easier said than done, I know, but it's not live. And we can always edit it, but I'm sure we won't.
No, we won't.
Hey, listen, Gemma, thank you so much for joining me today. You're very new to Hoxton Wealth.
Yeah.
First off, just tell us a little bit about your career journey then. Where have you been and what brought you here to Hoxton?
Okay. So I've actually only been here 7 weeks today, actually. So really quite new. In terms of kind of my journey, it started 23 years ago. So I've been in financial services 23 years. Started off in an admin role for Zurich Financial Services in Swindon. I did that for about 2 years, and then I decided I wanted to go into file reviews, which was like a completely different department. Mainly because, two things. One was that they trained you up to be qualified as kind of similar level to the advisors. So I thought at that point it would be good to get some financial services qualifications. And then the other point was, which I'm not like this now, I just kind of want to head up, that this department, which was called the Business Evaluation Unit, which everyone called the Business Prevention Unit, I was aware that you could go into that department and you could kind of tell the advisors what to do, where they had to like answer to you. And I was just like, oh, this is amazing. Like, because I'd come from this admin department where they called you, the advisors, like at month end and were like shouting to get the cases pushed through. So I was like, well, it'd be good to go into a department where they actually listen to me for a change. So that was kind of like the main driver. So I was at Zurich for about 7-8 years. And then moved into employee benefits. So again, financial services like group life assurance schemes and all those kind of things. Just had my 2 boys then, so I kind of wanted something like a little bit, I guess, like a step back. Again, like I guess a kind of more admin-y role, just while I was working part-time. And then after the boys were a bit older, I went to work for a network and was a file reviewer. And kind of did like pre-sale checks and post-sale checks. Was there for about 4 years, and then had a bit of a run-in with the manager at the time where, this is quite key, I think, for me. It's quite a key point in my kind of career journey where she was going to an employee kind of feedback session, and she'd emailed our team is about 10 people, and she wanted to know if we had any feedback or did we have anything, that we wanted her to voice in this session, because there's kind of like directors there, HR people and things like that. And I'd fed back that I'd seen like kind of the job that I was doing, I'd seen it advertised, so as in we were trying to get a bigger team for like a crazy high salary. I can't remember what it was now. Something like 10, 15 grand more than what I was on. So I thought, she's asked me my opinion. I'm gonna, give my opinion on that. So I just said, well, actually, it would be really helpful if you could ask them how we can kind of afford to bring new people in with no experience within the company on like a much higher salary than I'm on. And she came back and said that wasn't the case, that wasn't the salary banding for the job. So I kind of like screenshotted the job role and like the salary banding and sent it over. And I was like, well, but it is, because I've found it. And it was just kind of this backwards forwards argument. And I just thought, why am I working for someone that's asked me for my opinion? Like, as in a personal opinion, it's not like related to like work. It's actually my personal opinion, and is now arguing about my opinion and won't take that forward. So I basically handed my notice in with no job, because I was really quite annoyed by how that had kind of played out. And that I was kind of being, not like gaslit, but kind of it was being made to sound like that I definitely didn't see a job like advertised at this salary. And I was like, but I have, because, here's kind of evidence, here's the research. So I handed my notice in with no job, which was like, looking back now, was crazy, but it was actually such a good decision, because I had a 3-month notice period. And at that point, I think I'd been in financial services probably about 13-ish years, 14 years. So I knew that I probably would get a job at some point with the experience and the qualifications. And he ended up going to work for a really small outsourced compliance company in Essex, in Colchester. And that role is just it's just helped me get to where I am now. Like the knowledge, the experience I got from them. They were a lovely small company, like family run. And if I hadn't have handed my notice in, then kind of I just feel like that the rest of that wouldn't have happened. And I feel like that was supposed to happen, if that makes sense.
No,
but it's a crazy decision, really, looking back.
No, I think lots of people end up in the right place through things that don't often seem the right way.
Yeah.
I'm now working for Hoxton Wealth as their head of creative. 11 months ago, I was running a recruitment business. I won't go into detail, but a lot of chaos happened.
Yeah.
Weirdly, I almost was praying for it to happen, because I'd had enough. But it took something to come along to shake things up a little bit, like a tornado, right? Sometimes a tornado comes and creates massive destruction, and sometimes it comes along and clears your path. And these things that happen for a reason, and I'm just a firm believer in that. What I'm interested in here now, though, is you left. You had that 3-month period where you could leave, right? There was a confidence thing there for you. I think that's one of those things that are quite valuable. I think people can learn from that. It's like when do you have a contract, do you see whether or not you do have a notice period? But going into a consultancy, why did that transform you and change you, though? What about that role was it that actually opened you up to a different level of career development, perhaps?
I think it's a combination of things. So I'd only ever worked for networks or product providers, and this role was a compliance consultant working for IFAs. So when you work for a network and product providers, which I'd never realised, because I think if you've only got experience in that until you're exposed to something else, that's all you kind of ever know. You just get used to that. So working for a network, they basically decide internally within that network, like how the firm is going to run. So the guidelines around, like a sales process and what products they have to recommend and all sorts of things, like what goes in the recommendation letters. So that's all very specific to that network. And I didn't realise that. I thought that was just like what everyone had to do in the UK. So it was only when I then went to work for directly authorised advisors, I remember saying a couple of things to like the manager that was training me, like, oh, shouldn't they have to put this in here or this? And she was like, oh, no, that's because you've come from a network and it's, their interpretation of the FCA rules. So that side of things was like a massive eye-opener for me. And also, again, when you work for a network, you just work in your little department. You don't have a huge amount of interaction with any other like work colleagues, departments, senior people. And when I went into the IFA world, I was working with some people that it was just like a one-man band. Like the advisor was like the business owner. He did the compliance, he did the anti-money laundering, he did everything whilst trying to run his own business and make honestly, it was, what some of them did is just, it's just crazy. Like, I don't know how they did it.
They're still out there doing that.
Yeah, they are still out there. Yeah. And it just gave me, I guess, yeah, it just opened my eyes and made me more aware of how it works when they're directly authorised. And then I guess from the consultancy perspective was I'd go into like loads of different firms. So I covered 23 firms in the southwest of the UK. And so every day was like a different day. So some could be like one-man bands. Some were like 3 or 4 advisors. There was one firm in Bristol, there was like 20 odd advisors. So it was very varied. But I would do a compliance meeting every day with directors, and it just gave me a lot of confidence to be able to speak to people at different levels. And yeah, I remember going into it like being really scared about the meetings. With my training session, it was a long induction. I think it was about 6 to kind of 9 months. So I didn't lead any of those to start with, and they kind of just slowly eased me into it. And I remember thinking, oh, there's no way I can walk into a firm and just sit in a meeting with all these directors. And I managed to do it. So it gave me like a huge confidence boost in terms of like how to interact with people and kind of, obviously guide them on compliance was the main bit, and just have conversations around that. So nothing I'd ever been exposed to before. So it was just, yeah, for me, it was, that decision was pretty, not life-changing, but it was just very big in my career, I think. So
what was your biggest lesson about business owners during that period?
I think just about how, anything massively affects them. Any decision they make massively affects them. Whereas when you work for a network, it's all very, it goes up to like the CEO, the COO. It's very high level. Whereas for business owners, every like little decision, it feels like a little decision, but it could be massive for them, depending on whether that's relating to like compliance or like the fees they're charging. It's huge, especially for the really small firms. And they were quite, understandably, protective of their business. And, their clients were like, not family members, but, some of them had had very long relationships with these clients. And you don't really get that working for a network, because it's more, it felt like they were kind of more removed from that client relationship, I guess. And I guess because you are working for a network, aren't you? So, not everything you earn goes to you. Cuts of that, those fees go to the network and things like that. So it was just very, very different, yeah.
So when you hear stories of advisors under huge amounts of pressure that are running their businesses, especially when they're directly authorised, you've seen that firsthand.
Oh, yeah, 100%, yeah.
So transitioning into a business such as Hoxton Wealth, for instance, right, where you've got multiple people in the compliance teams, you've got different people in different roles within the business. You haven't just got one person doing absolutely everything. Yeah. How different is that?
Again, yeah, it's you kind of flipped back, like not the same as a network, because obviously we're not as big as that, but we've got obviously we've got quite a lot of the compliance team in Dubai, and they're doing different things out there. So then you've obviously got to think about the kind of the time scale, because they're ahead of us. I think what I like about Hoxton, and sometimes you don't get this with networks, is if you want to make change, it's really hard to make change in a massive company, because you're having to go through all these different layers of people, and then people want to have a meeting about it, and it just ends up being a long-winded process to change something quite, relatively small. And the experience I've had so far, it's not like that here. And that's what, I think most people that go into compliance want to make some kind of change, like for the good. And for me, that's quite reassuring, that if I feel something's not being done right, or I'd like to see an improvement, I speak to Paul or JJ, and it's, the wheels are put in motion quite quickly. And I like that. Something shouldn't have to take months, because if I'm mentioning it now, obviously it's quite urgent, and it shouldn't need to take months for that to take effect.
Do you come up with a lot of ideas? Do you tend to be somebody that when something is said to you, or you see a problem, that you start to come up with solutions quite quickly, and you want to be able to bounce off of people and fix problems? Or
I do. I don't always kind of react straight away. Like I kind of do like, I was talking to my old manager from the when I was compliance consultant. I was speaking to her the other week. And she was like, oh, why don't you just do like, just a piece of paper with like a kind of like a brain dump. So I've kind of put all my, as I'm speaking to people in different departments and learning about different things, I'm just like making a note of things that I'd like to look at changing. But sometimes it's just like something's come up, so I'll just make a note what it is that's come up, and then I'll go back to that maybe at another point and think, well, I could change this, or we could add this in. So sometimes it's immediate. It depends what it is. If it's something I've not had a huge amount of experience in, sometimes it takes a bit longer to kind of, work out what you're going to do with that. So.
I'm interested how people manage those kind of, I call them brain farts.
Do you get them then?
I get them a lot. And I come up with these ideas and I get really excited.
So do you do it immediately? Or?
I can sometimes get so excited that I will literally walk over to somebody's desk and just tell them my idea. Like, we're doing this, we're doing that. Rah, rah, rah. So what I do now is I have like a list and I write it down, a bit like what you do.
Yeah.
And I put that idea there. And if it still excites me in so many days' time, I go back to it. But more often than not, that list of ideas that I have, they are so far in advance that I can't do anything with them yet anyway. So I often see things before they've happened. That sounds a bit weird, but I do. I often see like solutions. But look, we all have great ideas, brain farts. We all have these great ideas, right? But it takes a lot of energy and effort to actually get to the point of making that change, right? So instead of getting too excited about the idea and getting high off the dopamine that it releases and the serotonin it releases, and in your head you've completed it there and then, you've had success. I put it there and then I come back to it. But more often than not, one of those ideas in that pool, if you like, could take years to come to fruition. Like one of the ideas I got at the moment is an Expat Life podcast, right? And it's all about building partnerships with introducers through podcasting and co-content creation. I had that idea 3 years ago, but I had to get into a financial planning firm to be able to bring that to fruition. So I needed a way to get into financial planning firms. So obviously I had to build, you had to keep continuing on with my Financial Planner Life podcast because that built credibility within the space that then allowed me to move into the profession. But even coming into Hoxton, I've had to build Hoxton Life first before I get there. And of course I've been excited about it and we've been talking about it, but it's had to live there. And I've been playing around with it and toying with it and everything like that. But now it's coming to the surface. So many months later, years later, whatever it might well be, it eventually comes around. So that's the beauty of writing them down, is not to forget them, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just to say, maybe it's not the right time right now, but if I remember it, then it will come when it's due. A bit like that. Have you ever sat and reflected in your life around your career?
Well, kind of ahead of this, I was thinking last week and the week before about it. Because it's just not, I think when I went into financial services, I just didn't think, 23 years down the line, I'd still be here. I don't know what I thought I'd be doing, to be honest, but, and definitely like the last, I'd say since 2019, so the last 5 years, it really has accelerated quite a lot, and it's kind of, like a few of my friends when I got this job, they were like, oh, this is crazy, like head of UK compliance. I was like, I know. Yeah, it's just odd, like how these things happen, I guess.
So when you reflect upon taking the job on then as head of UK compliance for Hoxton, your friends were saying, wow, that's a big responsibility. How did you come to terms with the fact that I'm going to be taking on a role like that? Because you hadn't done that before, right? No,
so the firm I worked at before Hoxton, it was much smaller. So there were 7 advisors, so really much smaller, like an employee-owned company as well. So it is very different to Hoxton. And I think it's really odd though, because it was like the job was advertised as like compliance officer, and then when my actual job offer came through, it was like head of UK compliance, and I was like, what is this? Like I wasn't aware that this was what I was going to be called. So it was scary. It's still scary at times now, I think. Like I was saying to you the other day, you just get this imposter syndrome sometimes where you feel like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. But I do know what I'm doing. Like I know I do. Like I am good at compliance, and that's why I'm in the role. I think I do have like these like little panic attacks sometimes. But
don't we all, mate?
Yeah.
No, we do. I do as well. As I said to you, I still get those now. David Bowie said it best, right? you want to get yourself into a place of discomfort because that's where the best things happen. And you described it as walking out into the ocean. And you know when you walk out into the ocean and you keep walking and you keep walking and you keep walking, just where your feet are about off the ground and your mouth's up there, he said that's where the magic happens. So more often than not, that uncomfortable feeling, right, we've walked towards it, but that's the uncomfortable feeling you're kind of looking for, and that's where the growth happens. Yeah. So I always think when that comes up, it's like, it's an opportunity to grow. Growth is not very comfortable. It sharpens our mind because we have to breathe in that space. And before you know it, you're kind of through the other side and you're like, this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. This is the role that I wanted. This is the role that I asked for. Something interesting, something that pushes me, something that makes me feel like I shouldn't be here perhaps. But actually in reality, you're 100% should be there. Yeah. Paul Tate is definitely not a stupid guy. So he went through the interview process with you and he knows exactly who to take on. Yeah. So just like compliance then, for those interested in compliance, especially in the international space, what's the biggest difference then in the international space you're seeing so far or have learned or are working towards or understand?
So I haven't, and I think that's part of what interested me to Hoxton as well, like the international side, because I've only ever had UK exposure in terms of like regulation and the FCA. And I've been in, Paul's kind of had me in on a few calls with the regulator out in Dubai. Oh, sorry, not the regulator. It was someone that does like our like anti-money laundering and stuff. And just some of the processes are some of the kind of, I guess, the wider guidance is similar to the FCA. But I think the kind of the more detailed stuff differs quite a bit. Now, I haven't had kind of a lot of interaction in terms of that. But I did express to Paul that that I would be interested in learning about other regulators and things like that, because I've just never had that, and I think you can't get that experience without kind of being given that opportunity. Yeah. But from what I've heard, in terms of what other people have said, like the FCA, obviously in the UK, they are a strict regulator. So I think then when you look at other regulators across the world, they are not quite as strict as the FCA. So I guess I'm coming from a good place where, the standards are up here. And I think that's probably the best way to go, rather than you coming from a regulator where they've got low standards to get then up to what the FCA are expecting is probably quite a challenge. Yeah. But yeah, Paul, obviously I watched his podcast. Like, I don't know how he just remembers, like, there's 6 regulators, 6 countries. That's crazy, like, to remember. Yeah. Like, the kind of the different standards for each one. That just blows my mind.
But I think as well, and as he expressed in that episode he did with me on the Financial Planner Life, he didn't do it all in one go.
No.
And I think that's where maybe that feeling of uncomfortableness might come when you go into a firm that is multi-jurisdiction. He built it out as he went along. So he moved from one to the other, to the other, to the other. So it wasn't sort of lumped on him in one go. I don't think anybody would be able to deal with something like that. And I think where you are in this space with the UK focus is brilliant, because it allows you to open you up to the advisors in the UK that are dealing with international clients and what that looks like, and gradually getting involved in the meetings by the sounds of it with Paul and opening yourself up to these different jurisdictions. It's a progress, not perfection situation. Yeah. And I like that. That's how I've done it over the last few months coming in here. I've really opened myself up to talking to different people, and I quite like that. I'm quite nosy. I'm quite intrigued and interested in what they're doing, how they're doing it, and I learn that way. And getting stuck in, I think, is the key thing. From a compliance perspective, and for those maybe listening and don't really know a huge amount around what's required to be a compliance manager or a head of a UK compliance, qualification-wise then, is your qualification journey differ from, say, a financial planner?
No, it's pretty much the same, actually. So kind of going back to the Zurich job, so their stance was, if you're going to be checking advisors' work, then you need to be at the same level as an advisor, which I think makes perfect sense, because how are you able to kind of comment and like add suggestions or value if you don't have the kind of the technical product knowledge and the sales process knowledge. So I've got my level 4 diploma through the CII. Now I started it back in 2003, so it was back then it was called like financial planning qualifications, so or financial planning certificates. So I did 3 of those to start with, and then I think I've done it now over obviously that 23-year period. I've done, I think it's 14, 15 exams. So I had to do like a gap fill because they then changed it to diploma. And it's not just financial planning. I've got like, not that we do mortgages here, but I've got like the mortgage qualification, equity release, long-term care. I did do a compliance one, which was my first compliance exam. I did that nearly 2 years ago. Because I thought it would just be interesting to see kind of like how a compliance qualification compared to like a more technical product one, but actually kind of incorporated quite a lot of the technical knowledge that I'd already built up. So it seemed like a quite straightforward one to do. So so you have to be qualified to the same level, ideally, because I think it's a combination of things. I think also it gives you like a good understanding of what the advisors have to go through, because those exams, like I did the CII ones, they're a lot of work to do. You spend a lot of time studying for those. So I think it gives you like a good kind of understanding of what they have to go through to get to the same level. But also it just helps with, sometimes they might submit a recommendation that's not quite perfect, and as you have the product knowledge, you can kind of sometimes guide them a bit as to, well, maybe this is not quite right as it is. Do you want to maybe tweak it to do this? And yeah, it's just good to be able to kind of guide them, I guess, and provide a bit of support.
As a compliance manager, do you sometimes feel like your head's on the chopping block a little bit?
Yeah, all the time. I think the worst thing, that's one of the worst things about it is... I have not experienced it here yet, but like if you're like calling someone, they're like, oh my God, compliance are calling, like, what do they want? And it's just like an immediate like, God, what have I done? And it's like, then you're like, oh, everyone just thinks you're like miserable and negative. And so I do think you need to have like a bit of a thick skin, like to work in this industry, as in compliance, not financial services. Because not often, you can disagree with people, and then you're trying to get to the best kind of, solution for everybody. So it is, it can be tricky a lot of the time. So
being able to negotiate with people and be empathic, I suppose, as well. It's a highly desirable skill set for somebody in compliance, because, as you said, it can put a bit of fear into somebody when you phone somebody up. So how you approach that conversation. Are you able to build that rapport with them, first of all, and get someone to understand that the reason I'm asking for this to be done, or the reason I'm asking for this information, is because it's for the good of you, protecting your clients, protecting the business. And it's my job to do that. It's a safety net at the end of the day. And when you're messing around, and not even messing around, but when you're looking after people's money, that's
it's huge,
hugely regulated. Right?
Yeah. And I think that's sometimes what advisors don't understand, like that. So I'm just waiting for my FCA application to go through at the moment. But once I'm back on the FCA register, like if the advisors do something wrong and I'm aware of that, and I don't, control it or put plans in place to kind of rectify things, like I'm personally responsible. And I think, so when I'm asking them for something, I'm not asking for the sake of, I'm asking for an actual reason. But I guess that mindset has come from, there are some compliance people out there that are very kind of black and white, and if this box isn't ticked, they're going to mark you down, or they're going to ask you for that. And I'd like to feel like that I'm a bit more approachable in terms of, if it's not affecting, so say I'm doing a file review, if that box isn't ticked, does that actually affect this work that I'm checking? Does it affect this client? No. Well, I'm not going to go back and ask them for something. Whereas there are some compliance people that are slightly more stricter, I guess, on things like that. Now, that doesn't mean like I'm breaking any FCA rules. Like the FCA provide guidance and rules. If it's an FCA rule, then I would never like bend any rule at all. But if it's guidance, then I feel like I'm a bit more open, because at the end of the day, I think both myself and the advisor generally just want to have like a good outcome for the client. So if we can compromise and get there in a good way, then it's kind of better that we do that, rather than I'm asking them to kind of create more documents or a longer letter, or whatever the case may be.
So you're looking for ways to make the advisor's life easier.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've never like tried to kind of make it more difficult or harder, or like prevent business at all. Like I'm just not that way inclined at all. It's just about doing the right thing for the client. And I think compliance people, it's about having ethics and morals. And I think sometimes with advisors, I wouldn't say they have that all the time, but they're working from a different point of view to me, and often I don't sit in front of a client like we're doing, which is kind of like how the advisor and the client would be. And so I try to be empathetic in terms of like I'm sat in an office saying, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. But actually when it gets down to it and they're sat in front of the client, how easy is it for them to do what I've asked them to do or have that difficult conversation? So it's trying to find ways that work for both of us. Like, so they're kind of, getting the FCA points done, but are they doing it in a way that is more comfortable for the client and they're not offending anyone and things like that? So
it's a team effort.
Yeah, definitely.
Without a shadow of a doubt. If you look at it in like a football team, you've got the financial advisors. They'll love this. They're like the strikers, aren't they? They're out there scoring the goals.
Think that, yeah.
But then you've got the midfielders and you've got the defenders, and you don't have those individuals protecting you at the back, making sure that nothing slips past them, and all that hard work they're putting in can be taken away in a second, and you need different types of people within the business looking after the team, and that's essentially what it is, isn't it? Compliance. And that's the way that I have always understood it. I used to work for Aviva and I was a trainer for Aviva, so I used to train out like pension products and investment products, and God, if you ask me that stuff now. Do you remember A-Day, when A-Day came out? Like, I had to train that out to loads of like customer service people, basically. That was what it was. And I remember I used to work quite closely with compliance, because if I did any training content, then I had to take it to them. So then I'd pick and choose who I took it to. Because some of them, like you said, would get the red pen out, can't say that, can't say that, can't say that. And some would say, you can say that, and I get what you're saying, but say it in this way. And I was like, okay, cool. So they gave me like flexibility on what I could say, whereas some were just like, no. And the problem I had was in the way I was creative, and I was trying to train people who were like 18, 19, 20 years old, straight out of school or university or whatnot. How do I make a pension sound interesting?
Exactly, yeah.
Enough for them to be able to understand and not also mislead any customer who's asking up for an evaluation or something like that, But I worked with compliance in a way that I could see both sides of it. But I would pick and choose who I went to, because I wanted the result that I wanted.
Yeah.
What's the most interesting thing about your job?
I think it's just very varied. Like, there's like since I've been here, I would say no day has been the same. So it's just, and I think that's the thing with compliance. It's just like there are a lot of other interactions. So like sometimes you can have like HR interactions. So as an example, we have to check the references that come through for the advisors. Are they completed properly? Are there any gaps? So I think when you talk about compliance, people don't realise that it has quite a lot of impact in other departments. I'm dealing with quite a lot of the acquisitions at the moment. Like, I've never dealt with acquisitions before. So for me, that's really, like brand new. And again, because it's new, it's interesting. It's been challenging at times, but like you said, you can't grow without challenges. So that's just, I've had no experience in that at all. So that's been really interesting. So it's just very varied. I think that's what I like about it. Like, and I think, do you think that it's like that with any compliance kind of officer role at most firms, that it is, you can kind of just be pulled this way, pulled that way, like depending on kind of what's more important at that time. But I quite like that. And I quite like it sounds a bit weird, I quite like the pressure at times. Like, I can get stressed, but I think I personally work quite well under pressure, more than if I've got like loads of time to do something. I kind of just am a bit more laid back, and then I maybe don't get it done in the kind of order I'd want to do it in, which sounds ridiculous if you've got a huge amount of time. Whereas if I'm like pressured with like a time scale, I just seem to work better under that. I
do as well. I can leave things to the last minute, but the problem with me is it sits in my head and I worry about it.
Yeah, I'm a bit like that.
I'm like, why am I doing it? Why am I doing it? Why did I leave it to the last minute? I think it's because I'm a bit of a dopamine fiend. When your arse is against the grass, like, and you've got to get it done, you're motivated, aren't you? There's an element of stress there, so it pushes you and you have to do it. And I think some of the best work that I ever do is spur of the moment. I think that's why I like podcasting. I could sit there and plan a podcast, but ultimately it never turns out the way that I think it's going to anyway. So I enjoy the situation. I enjoy the moment, and I'm thinking on my toes, how can I take this conversation you know, and it's very, very interesting. As a business that's growing, Hoxton Wealth, you know, we're careering towards 300 people working for this business across 7 jurisdictions. If you were to be looking a little bit further ahead and growing the team, for instance, what type of people are you going to be looking for, and what type of individual do you think would fit in well in a business like this?
So, I mean, we've just recently been recruiting, actually. So we're looking for people that have file review experience. So there's going to be loads out there for like networks or like kind of like even the IFA side as well, depending on how big they are. People that have their diploma 4, we'd like that as like, or as close to that as possible. Maybe if they're 1 exam off, we'd probably look at that as well. We don't necessarily need people with the compliance experience that myself and Laura works with me. She's one of the compliance managers. But I think once you've got the file review experience, you can, you know, that's a skill that you can just literally move to any company, and they've got like a good knowledge and understanding of the requirements in terms of recommendation letters and the disclosure documents around fees and things like that. So I think that's probably the best way of what we're looking for in terms of people. But we want people that are kind of like motivated to potentially move into other roles, because I think as we expand, we're going to be looking for, at some point, like other compliance managers and T&C supervisors. We're just outsourcing that at the moment, but at some point we're going to have it all back in-house, obviously, as we get bigger. So the department's going to get a lot bigger. So there's going to be room for people to move if that's what they want to do. But appreciate there's some people, you know, not everyone wants to see people just quite happy, aren't they, coming in at one level and staying at that level. And I think that's good as well, because otherwise you're going to be constantly recruiting to kind of replace those people.
Yeah, and it's great to have the opportunity within a business that's fast growing, because you can stay put. You don't have to be somebody that has to constantly push yourself. But it's lovely to be in an environment that if you need to feel the urge to want to develop, it's a business that you can develop in.
Yeah, definitely.
Was there an attraction to Hoxton because it was international? Did that do anything to you in respect of your decision making and joining?
Yeah, so for me, originally, I wanted to work for a bigger firm. So I kind of had in my mindset, you know, kind of 3 years after I joined my last company, at some point I decided I wanted to work for a bigger firm, kind of London area. And with Hoxton, it was the international side does interest me, because we have quite a lot of the advisors in Dubai that are, you know, their clients are coming backwards and forwards to the UK, so they can give advice in the UK because they're on the FCA register. So I've kind of only briefly touched on a few kind of interactions with clients in terms of they've got this product which is, you know, fine in Dubai, but now they're moving back here, we're going to look at this. And so that knowledge, or kind of that experience I'm going to get, that just interested me in terms of that exposure. And I just think kind of before Brexit, a lot of UK firms had like a passporting permission, which gave them the opportunity to give advice in a different country if they had that passporting permission. But after we left the EU, those permissions were removed. So there are a lot of UK firms that are not able to give advice in other countries. And it's really difficult then when you get these clients that are moving, you have to basically end up disengaging with them and trying to help them find an IFA in France or Spain or whatever country. There are obviously some IFAs in England that do that, but it's just really difficult because you've built up a relationship for a period of time, and then you're having to like hand them over to someone else or just disengage. And I think the fact that we have this cross-border situation, it's helpful for clients that are moving, can move to whatever country we've got, you know, coverage in. So it's just that, I guess, because you just got quite limited exposure to that in the UK, and I definitely had no exposure to that. So that just interested me in terms of.
When you had that sort of conversation, was there like a penny dropping moment where you thought, wow, this is actually quite.
Yeah, I think so. Like, it was just weird, I guess, not weird, but how it came about, because I was like, offered the job, and then obviously that's quite exciting. And then I can't remember how far into the kind of notice period I was, and then I think I messaged you because I saw this is hilarious. I saw your LinkedIn video and I was like, oh my God, I've been following Sam for ages. And then you were joining and I was like, this is just really odd. So that was just like and I think I said to you like, oh, like your podcast talking about you, that really inspired me to make me think that I have made the right decision. Because I think with any job you move to, there's always going to be an element of doubt. Like, am I making the right decision?
Yeah.
And obviously since then it's just seems to have gone crazy on LinkedIn, like, which is brilliant. But yeah, it's just your video. It's like, oh, I think this is the right decision. So yeah, I think that did make me feel better about the situation.
When you say it's gone crazy, I'm glad I helped you with the decision making. That's good. And do you know what? Funny enough, you're not the only person. I get phone calls from people who are joining and they're saying like they're almost been offered a job and then they phone me up and ask me my opinion. Yeah. And like, I think it's quite
give us
sweet.
some inside information.
Yeah, and I kind of have to put that hat on, this impartial hat. I just tend to push back on them and ask them, what do you think? You know, why are you interested?
Yeah.
What do you want from your career? And all I can really do is speak from an honest perspective as why I'm here. You know, I've seen the good and the bad and the ugly for 16 years. And I certainly wouldn't join a company if I didn't feel like it was exciting and the right place to actually be. And what I love is that there's always been a image of international financial planning as being negative. And I had it. And when I came into the world and I was scratching the surface and digging and asking more and more questions, and it almost sounded too good to be true that this business were doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
And then when I realized it was true, it was like, oh shit, there is a huge opportunity here.
Yeah.
And it just opened me up and I went, wow, I've got to get on this bus, as Chris would put it, you know, get on the Hoxton bus. And I did, and I'm glad I'm here. And it was the best decision that I've ever made. But you've got to sometimes just go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just accept that it's a journey and it takes a little bit of time, doesn't it, to get your head around all these different things that they're doing because it's so different from anybody else.
Yeah, that's true.
But resting on the basis of the fact that they've been doing it for a while now, 6 years, and they're doing well. You can't be regulated in all those different jurisdictions and have the scrutiny of those regulators on you, which they did, passing it, and not be a good business.
Yeah, because I can't remember if it was one of your podcasts where they basically ended up with the regulators in like 4 or 5 of the countries looking at them.
Paul
and I was like, that is crazy. Like, imagine the pressure. Oh, it was Paul's, yeah.
It was Paul, yeah.
Like, I was like, oh my God. So, yeah, and again, with all very different standards and the fact that they all came back and it was, you know, good to carry on, I think, yeah, that does say a huge amount about the company.
On a final note, what about the fact that it is international? Have you got any ambition to move to Dubai or anywhere else in the world?
No, not at the moment. I think because I've got 2 boys still at school, like 12 and 14, so that's not for me at the moment. I think if the opportunity came up to kind of help start up a compliance department in a different country, like I'd love to do that for, you know, like, cool. I don't know, 3-4 months or something, you know, to start that initial kind of like onboarding and get out into whatever country it may be and help with that. That would be more kind of possible with my kind of, being a mum as well, perspective. Never been to Dubai. I keep hinting to Paul, hopefully he'll see this podcast and will get me out there. So yeah, and I work with quite a few of them, like especially like with the acquisitions. There's a couple of them out there, like Charlie, Louis, Leslie, that I've been speaking to. So it'd be good to kind of get out there and meet them at some point. So
well, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, listen, it's been great to meet you. Finally.
Yeah.
And it's awesome that we're on the bus together on this Hoxton journey. We started roughly around about the same time. So great to finally meet you, like I said. And I mean, you're doing a fantastic job. And I'm pumped and enthusiastic about the future of this business, and I'm glad you're working it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.